And welcome to the Weekend Prime Time. Some breaking news tonight. Iran's Assembly of Experts has named Mujtaba al-Khamenei to replace his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as the country's new supreme leader. That is according to Iranian state media. It comes as we learned another U.S. service member has passed away from injuries received during the Iranian regime's early round of attacks across the Middle East. This marks the 7th service member killed in action. Trump and Israel's war with Iran is now entering its second week and a new phase. The U.S. and Israel conducting massive strikes against Iran's oil facilities, creating thick plumes of smoke across the skies in Tehran. And Iranian retaliatory strikes continue today, hitting Gulf countries, despite its president apologizing for striking its neighbors just yesterday. This comes amid growing speculation that we could see American troops on the ground in Iran. And now Axios is reporting that the U.S. and Israel have discussed sending special forces into Iran to secure its stockpile of highly enriched uranium at a later stage of the war. That is an operation that would likely require American or Israeli soldiers on Iranian soil. Joining us now, contributing editor for Wired, Noah Shachtman. Also with us, contributing writer at The Atlantic, Arash Azizi. He's also the author of the book, What Iranians Want, Women, Life, Freedom. Arash, let's start with the breaking news out of Iran. Mujtaba Khamenei is not somebody that is particularly known outside of Iran. He never held any formal position. The second, I believe, of the supreme leader's, the late supreme leader's son. But at some point, there was a lot of concern within Iran that Iran would not become a dynastic rule. And yet now, here they are appointing someone who's believed to be a much more hardliner, perhaps, than his father. What do you make of this announcement?
Not only he's not known outside Iran, he's not that much well known inside Iran either. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how much of a shadowy figure this guy is. Yeah. Most Iranians have never heard him speak. They've never seen him say anything. All we know about him are based on second-hand reportings. We know that he has connections to his father's office, obviously. We also know that he has connections to different security services. In different years, victims of the regime, prominent victims like people like Mehdi Karoubi, former Speaker of Parliament, Mustafa Tajzadeh, former Interior Minister, have said that they know that he was running some of his security forces. But this is not a guy we've known. So different rumors sort of about him, but it does appear, at least based on last week, it was the hardliners who were pushing for him and those inside the Revolutionary Guards. And yes, the irony of this regime that was founded on finding a monarchy, effectively bringing a sort of hereditary succession is not lost on anyone. Although there's a tradition in Shia Islam, obviously, of sons really mattering. Of course, the Shia system is based on hereditary succession in some ways, and sons of Ayatollahs running things really matter. But I think a big question is, how much of a stable regime can he build? How much of a stable order is he want to last or not? And I have my doubts whether he can be a lasting leader.
Israeli officials have said that whoever the supreme leader is going to be targeted. So it seems that they are in the business of trying to constantly decapitate whoever emerges as a potential supreme leader replacement. And now we know that Mujtaba is the supreme leader. Do you think that he has the buy-in, if you will, from all of the different agencies within Iran, the IRGC, the Basij, the parliament? I mean, I know that the Council of Experts plays the most important role in making this decision, but how hard will not only the external threats, the internal threats to his rule?
I think there will be very serious internal threats. I think he's not a consensus candidate. That's been clear in the last few days. Very prominent figures came out pleading with the Assembly of Experts not to go ahead with this. Hassan Rouhani, former president, very powerful guy, effectively. Ali Larijani, National Security Advisor, thought to be running things in many ways. But, based on what I know, he is close to Ghalibaf, who's the Speaker of Parliament, effectively running the war effort. And on the day Ayatollah Raisi died, president, if you remember, he died in a plane crash, a helicopter crash a couple of years ago. On that day, I spoke to someone close to Ghalibaf who said Mujtaba will be the leader when the time comes. And so this is something that people have planned for a very long time. And might surprise some, but they've actually been trying to sell him not as a hardliner, but as comparing him to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, calling him that he'll be the new
young
MBS.
Reformer type.
And a modernizer of sorts. Of course, heavily taken with a heavy grain of salt. It's not clear at all that there's any truth to this. But this is something they've planned. He has many supporters, but he also has many opponents inside the regime.
Noah, we know that Trump has made clear that he thought he was going to be the person who gets to choose Iran's next leader. What do you think the U.S. and Israel are now planning to do?
I mean, I couldn't begin to speculate because what they've done so far is so freaking crazy to me that I don't even want to know what the next step is. But look, I can't imagine that they launch this whole war and think they're going to pick, declare they're going to pick Iran's next leader only to get the sun. That just doesn't seem like that's logical to me. And every sign that I'm seeing is that they're flirting with the idea of ground troops, as you said, in the open. And, then we could be in for something that lasts. I mean, we all remember Iraq. This could last months. This could last years.
We actually have sound from a senator who said, of course we're not going to send in troops. Let's play that.
That's why I say President Trump he's not trying to start a war. He's trying to prevent a war. I do not believe the president will send in troops. In fact, if he sends in troops, the thud you hear will be me face planting because I fainted. I think this will all take a matter of weeks.
Arash, do you think it is possible for the U.S. to obtain whatever its objectives are, which, again, are kind of a moving target, but at the very least, maybe extracting the enriched uranium without having a presence on the ground?
I think if the president wants to get what he called the sort of Venezuela-style deal, where, he gets some sort of a leadership that he can live with, get some concessions on nuclear front and others, it might be possible. Frankly, it would have been easier without the war, if you ask me. I think there were many people who wanted to deal with it. But it might be possible. And that's sort of a hard question now facing the new leaders in Iran, whoever they are. They have a society. They're besieged by their own society. People hate the guts of these guys. They believe they've done nothing good for Iranians. And they've also brought our country to this war. Ayatollah Khamenei's entire magical shtick was supposed to be that we're not going to have a war, right? We very well have a war, obviously, devastating war. Beyond the worst imagination of most Iranians. Last night in Tehran, literally oil was coming from the sky. We've had the schoolgirls killed. We've had infrastructure Iran targeted. It only looks to get worse. So the new regime will have a hard time continuing this war. So they would have to find a way to get a new social contract. By new regime, I mean the new power in Iran, right, with Mojtaba or others, to get a new social contract with Iranian people and to somehow reach a deal with U.S. and ultimately Israel that would back them off. But of course, these things can take a while. It depends on what the president really wants. And I'm surprised that, most of us in our private lives, if we want to do something, we need to have some sort of a achievable end goal. So I don't know how.
You're applying logic and rationale.
So if Trump's aim is regime change, which we really don't know, he's given about 10 different reasons for why we're in this war. Why was there no plan for connectivity among the moderates that he is going to want to help take over the government? Because now I believe that 99% of the internet's down, and Starlink had tried to get connectivity, but they tried to get some terminals in with the State Department, but there's just nothing. It's a blackout right now.
Absolutely, and it doesn't seem clear what the plan is. The president has also said very, very strange things. For example, he said that there were people he had in mind to succeed Khamenei, but they're dead already. So, U.S. and Israel killed everybody who was dead. So if this was your candidate, why did you kill them? And also, I don't know how does he think he can influence the succession? People were joking that maybe he secretly is an Ayatollah and has a seat on the Assembly of Experts and is going to pick. But so it's not very clear there. But the real choice now is, okay, this is the declared leader of the regime, Mojtaba Khamenei. It's a rebuke to President Trump because he had said it shouldn't be him. So the question is, what will happen next? Is he going to try to target him? Is he going to, try to push? That remains to be seen.
Noah, I'm hearing that we have some breaking news, which is that CENTCOM is actually saying that we have an 8th U.S. service member who has now passed away.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this yesterday during the dignified transfer, this sort of question of how these moments change presidencies, maybe change the course of a war, to watch the bodies of people who've literally given their lives up for this country for a war where we're all trying to figure out still what the objective is. If things continue to go in the direction it appears they are going in, do you think there will be pressure on the president, on the people around him, to change course here?
Yeah, I do. I mean, even listening to Senator Leghorn, or whatever his name is, that was giving sound before, talking about really there's not a real appetite for this war, right? This isn't even the Iraq invasion where people initially supported going in. There's no afterglow of 9/11. Nobody wanted this war in the first place. So I think as you start to, unfortunately, hear reports like the one we just did, the outcry is going to be quite big.
Noah, one of the ideas of using boots on the ground would be to capture the strategic oil field known as Kharg Island, which produces, I believe, 80 to 90% of Iran's crude oil. Yeah. And there's some notion that there's some thinking that if the U.S. captures this, it will then be able to force the Iranians into surrender because it is their main economic lifeline for the regime and the country. We saw what they did yesterday to the oil field to try to kind of break their will and their spirits. Talk to us about this piece that you have about how important energy is for Iran and whether it can be used by the Americans to try to force Iran's hand, and what concerns there may be for Iran to retaliate against other oil fields across the region.
Right. Okay, so Kharg Island could be a Venezuela-style solution. That's the way that...
Like deploy special forces, capture the island, and then force the Iranians, or exploit it. Who knows?
I know that the Trump administration has said that we are going to run Venezuela by running its oil.
Right.
Okay. And so they may see a similar thing with Iran. Of course, Venezuela's leader, Delcy Rodriguez, is somebody that's been dealing with the United States behind the scenes for 10 years. I don't know that there's a real equivalent that seems to be coming to power in Iran. But yes, energy has been at the absolute center of the Trump administration's adventurism over the last 6 months. It's one of the main reasons it went after Venezuela. And Trump's advisors told him that if he went into Iran for a second time, that there would not be major oil shocks in the world, and that he could basically go in and kind of get a free pass on the global economy. Wow. We'll see if that continues to be the case with oil shooting past $90 per barrel.
I don't understand. Why would somebody make that argument with a straight face? I mean, like, we know that 20% of the world's oil transits or used to transit through the Strait of Hormuz. We know that Iran is going to do something to try to fight back. They had said that they were going to try to shut down the strait entirely. At the very least, they can make it very dangerous for ships and tankers to transit through. Why would anybody in the White House give that advice?
Okay, I am now going to convey the White House thinking.
Okay.
I do not endorse this thinking. Here it goes.
Sorry, we do need to mention that we are showing on the screen people celebrating in the streets the announcement of the new Supreme Leader. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. So speaking of supreme leaders, this is Trump's quote-unquote energy dominance policy. And the thought is that if the U.S. corners as much of the world's energy market as possible, it will functionally serve the way OPEC served back in the 70s and can control energy prices and can weaponize the flow of oil and natural gas around the world. And so they saw last June's attack on Iran, and that prices in oil went up and down relatively quickly and relatively, not too much of a spike. And they were convinced that could happen again. We'll see.
There's one thing I was going to add to that, which is China is watching all of this. China gets 80% of its oil from Iran, and so they have all kinds of vessels that are in the Persian Gulf right now, and they're watching what is happening very closely. I mean, we talked about this yesterday on the show, that the U.S. is lifting sanctions on Russia so that Russia can sell its oil to try to stabilize oil prices, while at the same time expanding Russia's war chest with the money that it is getting from these sales. Yeah. China now is going to probably be drawn into this because they're watching America seize potentially this oil, disrupt its oil. And so they're going to have to look at what's in their national interest, and that's probably just going to complicate things even more. So it just begs the question how much planning actually went through beyond 2 steps from the Americans and the Israelis in this.
Totally. And China is actually is really well positioned to survive a temporary spike in energy prices. Why? Because they have been converting more and more of their grid to renewables, whereas the Trump administration has been opposing that. They've been putting many more of their cars on the road that are electric, while the Trump administration has opposed that. So in an odd way, the real energy dominance is actually China's and not ours.
Well, they're also hoarding oil at this point as well.
Arash, can I ask you very quickly before we go, what is it like to be part of the Iranian diaspora right now. You mentioned moments ago that people woke up in Iran to oil raining down on them, plumes of smoke, fire running through the streets. I imagine there are all kinds of mixed emotions for people watching all of this play out right now. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that's like?
Well, every morning I wake up, I call a list of numbers of my family members to know if they're alive. And when you see, images on camera of places you recognize, of my hometown, Tehran, being on fire like this, knowing that's where, that auntie lives, that's where that cousin lives. I call every morning. Thankfully, all of my family members are alive still, although many of them, were pretty close to not being so when you see where things are attacked. But in general, I think Iranians, inside or outside Iran, feel they're helpless. The reality is their fate is being decided not by themselves, but by Donald Trump, by Israel, and by different factions of the regime that doesn't represent them. So it's an utterly sad moment. And for those of us in the democratic sort of opposition to the regime, it's a result of our failure. That we were not able to organize, we were not able to get our act together to be able to have a political force that could call the shots. So it's a very sad feeling for Iranians. And most Iranians, like most people around the world, they were not political. They didn't want to be political. They wanted to raise their families. They wanted to live a life. Most Iranians voted, in elections when they could, even when the elections were limited. All they wanted was to, as I said, raise their families, keep war away from their country, and yet here they are, and it's a very sad time to be an Iranian, frankly. Even though we try to be cautiously hopeful that the next page of our country's history can be better, you always have to be. But as I said, the decisions that affect our lives and our fate are not taken by us, and that's not a good position to be in.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thanks
thank
so
you,
much. Thanks,
Arash Azizi and Noah Shachtman. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we hope your family stays safe.